Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'm super pleased to have in the studio with me Medea Benjamin. She is the co-founder of CODEPINK Global Exchange, codepink.org, of course, the website, globalexchange.org as well. You can tweet her at Medea Benjamin or at CODEPINK. And you have spent, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome
Good to
the
be here, Thom.
Yeah, just get the microphone here right up for you.
Okay.
You have spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and have a first-person, sophisticated, deep understanding of that region that I lack. That I mean, I think I know something about it, and I've spent some time there. But what are your thoughts on what we saw, this whole hoop-de-doop in Saudi Arabia with our president first?
Well, first, let's recognize that he was there the same weekend that the Iranians had an election where they came out in record numbers, 75%, to re-elect a moderate who is for not only the Iran nuclear deal, but for better relations with the West. And then at the same time, you have the Secretary of State Tillerson at a national press conference talking about how the Iranian people, we look forward to the day when they get the rights to free expression and free speech. And he's standing next to the Saudi foreign minister. And so a journalist naturally says, well, what about Saudi Arabia? And he refuses to answer that question. And then Trump comes, and there is Trump with a sea of despots from the Gulf region, all representing the Sunni world.
All hereditary kingdoms.
Hereditary
none
kingdoms,
of them elected.
like Saudi Arabia, an absolute monarchy that has no pretense of constitution, no pretense of national elections, no political parties, no trade unions, no civil society, nothing that can be considered democratic. And there the president is saying how magnificent this kingdom is and how wonderful it is that we're selling these beautiful military weapons to the Saudis, the ones who are most responsible for spreading Wahhabi extremism around the world. It's surreal.
Yeah. It struck me that the president got played, that the Saudis put him in, they invited all these other Sunni nations. There's only a couple of majority Shiite nations, I believe.
And they weren't there.
Iraq was there, but the leader is not Shiite, he's Kurd, right?
Right.
And is there a third Shia majority nation?
Bahrain.
Bahrain. Oh, was Bahrain there?
Yeah, but it's not ruled by Shia majority.
It's a Shia majority, but it's ruled by the Sunnis.
A Sunni minority.
Yeah.
A very iron fist.
As was Iraq at one point,
right,
prior to her. And that basically, Donald Trump just inserted the United States into this war inside the world of Islam on the side of the most radical of the Sunnis, the Wahhabists, the Saudis. And I don't think he has any idea that he's done this.
Well, I don't know if he has any idea he's done this. I think what he cared about is the weapon sale and the jobs that are supposedly created by these weapons.
And that they loved him.
And they loved him. And one of the things I think is important to point out, people say, well, why didn't he go to Mexico or Canada as his first trip? You know what? There would have been big protests out there in Mexico and Canada, right, and anywhere in Europe that he traveled. He loves going to Saudi Arabia because there's not a protester in sight, because if there were, they would be immediately arrested and flogged and imprisoned and tortured and maybe even at some point beheaded.
Did you see what Wilbur Ross said?
No.
Wilbur Ross, the billionaire commerce secretary, he came back and he said, there wasn't a single protester. It was so cool. Becky Quick was interviewing him, and she said, well, it's a police state.
I just wrote a whole piece about why there was no protest outside. But, I would say it really probably did figure into the calculation that Donald Trump wanted to go to a place where he would be regaled, where the red carpet would be laid on thick, and where there wouldn't be any protesters, certainly not on the inside, and in this case, not on the outside.
So over the next decade, we're giving the Saudis $300 billion worth of weaponry.
We're not giving them. They are paying, which is important.
You're right. Yeah, that's an important point. And they also have announced this 2030 initiative that by 2030, right now they manufacture 3% of their own weaponry, and they want to have 50% of their weaponry being manufactured by 2030. So there's a technology transfer, much like we did with China when we moved our manufacturing over to China, and then the Chinese said, oh, this is how you do it. So we're basically giving away our jobs and our factories, at least in the defense industry, to Saudi Arabia over the next 13 years. And Donald Trump doesn't seem to realize that either. Or would he just rather not talk about it? Or is that even...
will it happen after he is long gone?
Yeah, and so he doesn't get the blame
won't have to take responsibility for it. And remember, every time we give a certain kind of weapon to Saudi Arabia, the Israelis demand that we give them one up from that, so that they're always technologically superior. So this does fuel the arms race. And also imagine what the Iranians are thinking, being encircled, knowing that they're going to get all this new weaponry in Saudi Arabia. And Bahrain, they just authorized a $2 billion sale there. The Iranians are caught because they have this agreement, but I'm sure they're going to put their best scientists on full speed ahead on new weapons as well. So all we're doing is fueling the arms race, fueling the sectarianism, and guaranteeing perpetual war in the Middle East.
What the weapons that we're selling them, what are they, and what should that tell us about how they're going to be used? I mean, right now they're using our weaponry against Yemen, and correct me if I'm wrong. And there's a major famine going on there, and cholera outbreaks, and apparently we've got a ship off the coast, and we're refueling the Saudi planes. Do I have this right?
Yeah, we've been refueling Saudi planes under Obama, just like we've been selling $115 billion worth of weapons under Obama. So let's not pretend this is new, that it's the Trump administration. And let's also remember the U.S. has been supporting the Saudi regime since its founding. But there's a qualitative difference now, because the weapons deal is supposed to mushroom into the over $300 billion over the next decade, and because according to reports inside the administration, they are ready to give the green light for even further support for the Saudis in the war on Yemen. What are the deal is included in the deal? It's everything. It's ships, it's tanks, it's new planes, it's bombs, and part of it was this precision-guided munitions, which is something that the Obama administration put on hold and said it's only going to be used in Yemen, and it's only going to be used to kill more civilians in Yemen. And now the Trump administration says, let's go ahead and throw that into the package. But there's an important thing for your listeners to know, Tom, and that is Congress has the right to stop any of these weapons deals. It has 30 days from the time that it's announced officially by the executive branch to object to it. There were 42 different deals under the Obama administration, and there was a bit of a whimper from Congress towards the very end of things, but Congress never stopped any of these weapons deals. It's about time for Congress to stand up. And let's see those Democrats who refuse to question Obama finally stand up and in full force say, we oppose weapon sales to Saudi Arabia.
These be stopped by a filibuster in the Senate? I mean, that's basically the only power Democrats have right now.
Well, they could be stopped if they also got some Republicans to join, and that's not far-fetched because there are Republicans both in the House and the Senate. You know, not all Republicans love Saudi Arabia. And I think in some ways, if there was a really good campaign, we could, I don't know that we could stop it at this point, but, you know, there will be pieces of this deal that have to keep getting approved. And right now, for example, we could stop one piece, which is the precision-guided munitions, since we know that those will be used in Yemen. But I want your listeners to know one other thing, which is the tanks, for example. Nobody in the media is talking about the Saudi tanks that are rolling into a Shia town of Awamiya. Right now, as we speak, that town is under siege. Under the
town is in what country?
It's in Saudi Arabia. It's the Shia minority, 10% of the population, always been oppressed. They live in the most oil-rich part of the country, the eastern province. And the town of Awamiya has been invaded by the Saudi military with U.S. tanks, with U.S. weapons. And they are shooting at civilians. They are terrifying the entire town. And why isn't anybody in the media talking about it? Well, one of the things is the Saudis won't let any journalists go there. So what are the Saudis going to use the weapons for? What they have been using it for: repress people internally, mostly the Shia minority, put down uprisings, democratic uprisings overseas, like they did in Bahrain with U.S. tanks, continue to bomb the poor Yemeni people, and then to support al-Qaeda affiliates in Syria and Iraq.
And export Wahhabism all around the world. Trump in his speech called out the Houthis as terrorists. This is the group in Yemen that the Saudis are bombing the bejesus out of.
Right.
Who are these people?
So the Houthis are an indigenous group. I personally think the Houthis are to blame for taking their grievances the military route, but they did that. And then the Saudis said, they're supported by Iran, which was not true in the beginning. It was an indigenous uprising. Of course, when you get to the point where the Saudis get involved, the Houthis look for support wherever they can get it. Are
they Shia?
They are a type of religious group that is closer to the Shia. Okay. So the Saudis, thinking that this would be a couple of weeks intervention and they could put the president, who was an interim president, he was voted in an election that he was the only one on the ballot, and he was only supposed to be there for a year. He stayed on longer, and now when the Houthis overthrew him, he fled to Saudi Arabia and asked the Saudis to intervene. The Saudis have no right to intervene in the internal affairs of another country, and the majority of the destruction that's going on in Yemen right now is coming from the Saudi bombing.
Wow. Is there, we just have 2 minutes, Medea, thoughts, the president is in Israel now, thoughts on any possibility whatsoever that anything positive might come out of this with regard to the Palestinian situation?
Are you kidding me? I mean, the only thing that will come out is negative, because there is still this terrible idea of moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. There is still this terrible U.S. ambassador to Israel now, who has been a longtime supporter, physically, financially, of illegal settlements. He will only inflame the situation in Israel-Palestine, and between the desire of Israel and the Saudis to get the U.S. to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal and go into a war with Iran, we're in for very dangerous times if the American people don't speak out and force Congress to do something about this. I
just saw a documentary that said that, a Dutch documentary that said that Jared Kushner was a member of Chabad.
I don't know, but we have to know that. Do you know what role he played in sealing the Saudi deal? That he met previously, right before Trump arrived there, to negotiate the deal. When the Saudis talked about the price of something, he picked up the phone and called the CEO of Lockheed Martin and said, "Can we lower the price of this?" Yeah. So there he is negotiating a better deal for the Saudis for selling weapons.
Yeah, with American companies. Yeah, you American companies, you can't make a profit. We got to help the Saudis. But remarkable stuff. It's just remarkable stuff. Do you have any hope for peace in the Middle East?
Well, eventually there's got to be political solutions. And, Donald Trump, as crazy as he is, could play a good role if he had decent relations with Russia and said, okay, now we're going to bring Iran into this whole thing and let's sit down and unravel this mess.
That's what Obama tried to do. And it's almost like because Obama did it, Trump's not going to do it.
Well, maybe Trump will be forced to do it. But I think that it's high time Americans started opening their eyes to what's going on. The U.S. involved in 7 wars in the Middle East, and saying that enough is enough, that Trump might take us into the 8th war with Iran, which would be a
You're
really
listening
big
to the
one.
Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Thank you. Medea Benjamin, co-founder of CodePink, codepink.org. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back.